and a Joan or whatever, and then we'll kind of get you a background, and then we'll go into it. So this is where it begins.
So this is the Ott-Kimm Conservatory, and it functions on a few passive systems that allow it to function without input such as fertilizers, composts, electricity, all the things that are generally required for a greenhouse system. And it does so essentially by mimicking a lot of natural systems and using natural principles to drive a lot of the systems that would require inputs otherwise. And the few that I'm going to talk to you about today are the passive solar geothermal system for regulating temperature in here, the passive approach to fertilization and nutrient cycling, and the passive pest control system. So to start out with the thermal cycle in here, it's all essentially based on the fact that it's got a ton of thermal mass and it's sunk 6 feet in the ground to take advantage of the geothermal buffering capacity of the Earth. So being sunk 6 feet in the ground, it allows us to access geothermally buffered air, which it tends to be the average annual outside temperature, and in this area that's about 54, 55 degrees. And so as that air comes in the winter, it's kind of giving us a little bit of buffering heat that keeps it from freezing too hard, and in the summer it contributes a little bit of a cooling effect to keep it from overheating. Then you'll also notice there's a ton of thermal mass in here, all of the water, all of the stone, all the soil in the planters. That stuff basically just soaks up shortwave radiation from the sun all day long, and then when it re-radiates that, it comes out as long-wave radiation. And that long-wave radiation has a hard time getting back through the greenhouse glazing, and that's essentially what the greenhouse effect is. It stores that heat because it doesn't let the long-wave radiation escape as fast. So also we've got a north wall here it's about 15 feet tall, and we've noticed that about every foot you go up you gain a degree in temperature, and that change in temperature from the floor to the ceiling drives a thermal siphon. So all the air at the top is warmer and escapes over this tropical room here, and in doing so it draws colder air in through both of these doors, like on this end and the other end of the building, as well as to some extent up through the gravel. And the air that's coming up through the gravel is that geothermally buffered air, and this whole greenhouse rests on a bunch of river deposits, so it's essentially like 10 or 12 feet of gravel and cobble. So it's contributing a lot of air through that and a little bit of moisture as well. So as far as the nutrient cycle goes in here, we don't add any compost, any fertilizer, anything like that. And we're able to do that because the system provides enough organic material to just cycle back through the soil. And you'll notice all the soil is covered in all the prunings from last season, and the soil microorganisms and life in the soil turn it over so fast that within the season everything you see here will be gone, and we'll be relying on the stuff we trim off this season to feed the soil. There is a little bit of a trade-off that happens, seeing as how we take a little bit of food out of the system here. We kind of see what we do as a trade, where you'll notice things like the grapefruit rinds and the occasional banana peel, or some kind of food scrap that John has created in his house here that goes back in to kind of trade for the nutrients we're taking out by eating that fruit. Otherwise we'd create a deficit on the soil by taking it out. And the other aspect of that is that about 75% of what's produced in here is just fed right back to the soil, because the trees essentially produce what they need to survive. They mine certain elements, and when that fruit drops back on the ground, those elements in a plant available form are released back into the soil. We also don't use any pesticides or any kind of active attack on pests because, as I mentioned earlier, it's designed to be basically an ecosystem inside the greenhouse here. So there's a variety of niches that are all filled by organisms that are present here. And so when an organism that would be a pest is introduced, it's essentially competing for a niche. And so all these other organisms in here that have other niches filled feed on it, like the damselflies and the frogs and all these other critters would go and attack the aphids. We've also got, I'm blanking on its scientific name, but it's a parasitic aphid wasp. And what it does is it goes and finds aphids, stings it, lays an egg inside, and that egg hatches and eats the aphid from the inside out. So basically, as long as there's an aphid population, there's a pest control population. And an example of that, we had the, I think they're called the tiger leafhopper or the leopard leafhopper. They're a little kind of camo patterned leafhopper that attacks grapes. And was it 2 years ago? It was 2 years ago now. Yeah, they first got introduced in here, and they just decimated the grapevine. And then the next season, they were still here, but they weren't causing nearly significant damage. The grapes had leaves, a little bit of damage on them, and they actually produced fruit. So the system, in being so diverse and having all the niches filled, is incredibly resilient to that kind of impact. And then John wanted to talk to you a little bit about the rainwater that we use in here.
Yeah. On that same line, I observed something this morning that was kind of really unique. I have a minute pirate bug that lives on an avocado. I put it out in the greenhouse because it had aphids on it. And I was there like, I don't want it with my rest of my citrus, so I stuck it out here. And this little minute pirate bug, he became a buddy. He shows up every day. He has a route that he makes, and he comes to there sooner or later. Every day he's there. You know, he's been there for the last couple of weeks. But anyway, I saw him, and he took off last night, and I haven't seen him since. But I always look for him because if there's a tour, you might want to look and see what they look like. It's kind of exciting to find a bug and get his name, you know. So at any rate, I was checking this morning, and he wasn't there, but there was an aphid crawling out of where he was hiding. So apparently he was hiding in a branch where the new terminal growth was. He was waiting for that aphid to come out and the wind come out because he was staying there for a long time. So at any rate, the aphid came out, and the aphid wasp showed up. And so I happened to come just at the right time, and I watched the whole process. That the aphid gets all reared up on his back legs, and he's like going, and this aphid wasp just came up there and just stung him just that fast, and then just backed up, and the aphid's just freaking out. But anyway, then he went and looked for more aphids. So that aphid's in the refrigerator for whenever it's meat in the refrigerator. It was pretty awesome to watch it, though. I just stood there and watched the whole thing happen, so it's kind of exciting. But
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the whole tadpole damselflies.
oh yeah, there's a whole series on that too.
And so they both live in that swamp in the back. That's where the frogs breed and where the damselflies lay their eggs. And they emerged about the same time. So the tadpoles and the damselfly larvae are both aquatic and swimming around. But the damselfly larva is predatory, and so it eats a bunch of tadpoles. And then they all hatch out of the water, and the frogs turn right around and start eating all the damselflies. So there's this kind of traded relationship.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Circle of life.
Yeah. We had a girl do insects for me for 9 years, and she was pretty good. She started when she was about 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. Caught her out in the field with a sweep net and asked her what she was doing, you know. She was pretty smart. So I made lists of bugs that she could introduce, and she did it for 9 years. She'd be here sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. So the insect population is incredible in here. It's probably as good as anybody could ever make anywhere. But anyway, sidetracks. Let me get back onto the water.
Question. When you said what you were noting as far as the heat in inches or whatnot, could you say that again?
Oh, so
Degree per foot.
Yeah, it's about a degree per foot in elevation that you gain in here.
That's in Fahrenheit?
Yeah, and it creates a natural flow of air. You can't get any more than a degree. I mean, as soon as you hit a degree, the air's moving.
Yeah, it's always something.
Yeah, and so it automatically creates this, I guess they call it chimney effect, whatever you want to call it, but it's, yeah, for heating systems, when they calibrate a heating system for a house, that's where I first came across it 40 years ago. But at any rate, yeah, it's, you have that in a house also. That's what creates drafts in a house, whatever. But at any rate, that creates a natural flow of air. Yeah, what I'm supposed to be telling you about now is the water system. One of the principal catalysts that we use here to feed the plants is the water system. We use rainwater, which is virtually distilled water. It has no mineral content, basically, for practical purposes, although there may be trace. The fact that it has no minerals in it, and the fact that the pH of rainwater is 6.3 to 6.5. It usually, in the first beginning, when it washes, first flush off the roof, you'll run about a 6.5 because of all the dust and dirt and everything. But when it flushes clean, it usually, within a minute or two, it goes to 6.3. That's a stable pH of rainwater in this area here. And it may vary other areas, but that's my years of study, and that's what I always come up with. Those two principles are important. The acid against the base, that's the formula for how everything works. That's how our muscles work, that's how our body, nervous system, all these different things in nature works off of that reaction. They invented batteries off of that. So anyway, the whole earth working off of that principle is what actually is the breakdown of, referred to as demineralization, breakdown of mineral elements in the soil. There are more than enough elements in the soil itself to grow, however they're not plant available. And it's the weathering of these minerals, the breakdown of these minerals, to make them available for bacteria and all the different processes that all occurs through this acid-base formula. And another thing that it does is the fact that it has no mineral content. It's like a sponge. When it hits the ground, it right away absorbs minerals. and to make an equilibrium. And so that is an effect that also is very stimulating for the breakdown of minerals in the soil, demineralization. So basically we're feeding, as a principle, we're feeding all the plants with the rocks that are in here. So if you have the right diverse rocks, if you have the right
Parent material.
yeah, there you go, good point. Parent material. That will basically feed in perpetuity. The earth is close to perpetual as you can get, and this is a kind of like a created parallel small system of the big system based on all natural. And so that'll be the foundation. We will, when we're done today, we will build soil. We'll make the soil, we'll put all the chemicals in the soil, and so this is, as I said earlier, this is the finished product. This is the last chapter of the book. So you're getting to see, and then as we progress throughout the tours, you'll get to the very beginning where we actually take the rocks, get the mineral composition of the rock, and actually put it in the soil, actually grow the plant, and what it does in the plant, and then we'll eat it, and what it does for the human body. So you'll have a whole complete cycle when this thing is over. But to get you going and get you wound up, we want you to sniff this oxygenated air, because you'll never be as smart as what you are right now. Hey, turn the oxygen on. But no, we have higher oxygen levels, and we have higher carbon dioxide levels in here. We produce our own. We don't need CO2 generators in here or any of that kind of stuff. All that is part of the atmosphere that we want you to enjoy, smell. More, Ben?
Yeah, it's just pretty crazy that, so all these plants are basically feeding on CO2 through photosynthesis, yet somehow in this closed space there's still more CO2 than ambient outside. We brought a meter in here and it's somewhere in the range of like 50 to 80 parts per million more than ambient, even though all the plants are constantly utilizing it. So some part of the cycle, most likely the breakdown of all the organic matter in the soil.
You got
Bacteria. Yeah.
That's what I would guess.
That is harmonic. Yeah, that's really sweet. And then, of course, they generate the oxygen, and we breathe the oxygen, makes us healthier.
How's the pest control?
Sure, why don't you take
As you've learned so far, this is a closed system, and it's a Zone 8 greenhouse in our Zone 4 in Montana. As you notice, these plants don't grow outside here, and one of the really incredible things regarding insects in this greenhouse is the insects are from a Zone 4 climate, so they're not used to eating or, you know, decimating the plants that are growing in here. So their focus is more on decomposition, and that is, you know, like one way of doing like a passive pest control. And with those insects, most of the pollinators here are the common house flies and the damselflies, and there are all these smaller fruit flies. I don't know what specific species of them yet, but and they're clubbed as more commonly known as the roly-polies and salad bugs, doing decomposition, and yeah, they breed in the ponds and help all of this exist, because without pollinators you don't have fruit trees.
Except for, there are some that I am working with, some self-fruitful trees. An interesting concept, and I can show you this later, but I'll just do it real quick since we touched the subject, is actually the, okay, I'm going to get this wrong, all the stamens, the pollen heads are called what on the stamens? At any rate, the filament neanther is the, that's the female part.
No, that's the stigma style on the ovary, the anther.
Okay, stigma style, there we go. That part will sometimes rotate, and as it rotates it picks up the pollen itself. It's kind of interesting on some of the fruit trees. We'll actually have that characteristics. It's pretty neat. So, but yeah, that was just a side note. You're doing good, girl.
Kind of rusty.
There's all kinds of, we should introduce forsythia is the yellow flowering thing, the dwarf, genetic dwarf peach tree there, that's 30 some years old. This is a ginkgo tree. It's just still, I repotted it this winter, so it's coming out of dormancy. It will always stay in a pot because it would get too big, and I just want it. I love the ginkgo leaves; they're just awesome, prehistoric, whatever. There's a fig tree here. It gets 3 crops of figs a year. Let's see. There's a lot of swamp grasses. There's the blue and the yellow irises. There's ribbon grass. There's the yellow marsh marigold is just starting to bloom right now. Frogs have already laid eggs, basically 150 adult frogs here. They come up, they're territorial, so they live all over the place, and we'll go down and say hi to them here in just a few seconds. But they migrate from all over the place to the swamp, that frog breeding swamp in the back. That is an ugly, stinky, smelly swamp. It's specifically for the frogs. They go in there, there's a shallow area to the right and the deep area to the left. They feed in the left and they hatch out on the right. The water is shallow so that it heats up real quick. That is one reason for the higher level and the lower level of the facility here, where for the frogs and a warmer area. So we have basically 2 little zones within a zone. Frogs have already started hatching out the eggs. They laid eggs about 3 weeks ago, and some of the eggs are already hatching out. They're in the little gooey sacks. There's little tiny tadpoles wiggling around, and they've actually come out of the sack already. Yeah, there should be 150 of them. The males come up and sing, and they breed. The frog with the loudest and deepest voice gets the girl. So I don't know what that means.
And what kind of frogs are they?
Pacific tree frog, high-livered gillo. Yeah, I worked with about 9 different species so far. Right now, that is the only species that I have. Yeah, there's pictures all over different types of frogs and stuff. And okay, we'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Just real quick, could you give us an idea of the structural build and the angle of the roof of the greenhouse?
The angle of the roof is roughly 312. Somebody said that's 23 degrees. Is that correct? 22.5 degrees. Is that correct?
I'm not too sure.
It could be. 22.5 is half of 45. That's all I know. Is that 312? 612 is 45, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I
Yes,
guess
it
that
is.
makes sense, 'cause
Yeah, it
it's
is. Carpenter. Where's a carpenter? I haven't seen one forever.
And then
You got that joke, huh?
so when you dug down, what
Yes.
is it? Concrete on the walls
Yes,
below
I
the
dug this
soil?
by
here?
hand, and it was all gravel, so I separated the sand and gravel, reconstituted to the proper proportions. I have the highest grade of concrete you can make by hand, and poured all the walls by hand, all the forms by hand, slip forms. I just slip formed it all the way around, the footings, the walls, everything. It's basically 5 feet in the ground. Footings are below that 5 foot. 5 foot, so when you walk on the gravel, 5 foot is basically your ground level outside. So there's probably, like Ben said, 10, 12 foot of pure gravel underneath. So I have total control of the root zone. That was something that was critical for my research, was to actually have a confined area. The roots will not travel in those gravel bars. So I have basic confinement, everything that's
Giant
growing.
pots.
Yes, basically, terrace pots, whatever you want to call it. But I have total control of the nutrient cycles. I have total control of what these plants are capable of achieving. And that was part of my research, was one of the things I thought I would find was a collapsing point. And I have not found that, and it's been the same soil for like 36 years about.
Wow. And you've just been adding back your greenery and some house scraps in the soil.
Basically, a house scrap's been talked about is we put the grapefruit on lime haters. For instance, I don't know if you're familiar with blueberries. They need a 5.5 for soil pH. Okay, that's impossible. We're on limestone-based soils here. This is all limestone formations. I don't know if you noticed it coming down here. There's no granite, nothing around here. This is all limestone. This is what lime haters will not grow here. I watered a rhododendron down there one time with well water, just one time, because I was short of rainwater, and it took about 6 years before it ever bloomed again. That is how critical just one small watering of probably 3/8 of an inch of water was enough to kill that. There wasn't a leaf on it for several years. Finally, it started to come back. I was sure it was dead, but it finally came back. It took that many years to get that soil neutral enough that that plant could actually start to grow. They are lime haters. They will not tolerate any calcium bicarbonate. And all the water here is terrible. We run in close to 8 on our soils and our waters here. It is really, really bad. So actually to have a blueberry growing here is virtually impossible. So I did have a blueberry where this fig is, and that's why this fig's in this container. Here, I took the blueberry out. It had grown here for probably 10 or 12 years, and it was very sickly. We tried the grapefruit thing, we tried everything, but that planter was just too big. That one is a southern blueberry, which is a hybrid type deal where they grafted a different root stock, which is more tolerant of the pH, and they graft the top onto that so that you actually have a pH tolerable base with the, if you're familiar with grafting, it's a pretty sweet deal. But anyway, that way you can actually grow blueberries where you never could grow them before. It's a pretty slick little thing they did with grafting. And I will show you some grafts down here. We like to play with it too. We're not good like that, but we invent some of the stuff too. So having fun learning. What else did I want to say? Do you have any more before we go down?
I don't think so. Not if you're-
Can
Okay.
we talk about the ponds a little bit? Like
Well, I told you about frog breeding swamp.
Well, but how do you?
Stinks.
Yeah, because I don't see any aeration or anything.
Oh no,
Um,
no, that would ruin it for the
so-
frogs. They love slime.
And this
They're-
one too.
They're algae. This one here, yeah, this one here is definitely a failure. That had, we felt we were going to do an upgrade. That had ran great. It was